Before I start, a brief note for clarity. Every name you will hear tonight, Amy Harper, Tom, Olivia, Liam, Grace, the parish, the street names, even the exact suburb, has been changed. The real family, the real diocese, and the real exorcist who first handled the case asked that their identities remain concealed. What has not been changed is a single supernatural fact, a single manifestation, or a single recorded consequence. What you are about to hear is exactly how the demons presented, exactly how they operated, and exactly how they were cast out. This case began in the spring of 2015 in a quiet, upper middle-class parish suburb about 20 miles south of Denver, Colorado. Red brick colonials, good Catholic schools, soccer fields on Saturdays, and Sunday Mass packed with families. The kind of place where people still waved when you drove by. At the center of the story is a 39-year-old stay-at-home mother I'll call Amy Harper. Amy was the woman every young mother wanted to be. Slender, soft-spoken, long brown hair, always smiling that warm, reassuring smile that made you feel safe. She had been a parishioner in good standing at the local parish for 15 years, sang in the choir, ran the mom support group for bullied children, and had a parenting blog that, by 2015, had almost 40,000 followers. Her husband, Tom, 41, was a quiet, bearded engineer who worked 70-hour weeks at a defense contractor. They had 3 children, Olivia, 16, painfully introverted and already cutting herself in secret, Liam, 13, the athlete, and little Grace, 8, who still ran to her mother for hugs every afternoon. Like every family in that parish, the Harpers were devout. Weekday Mass, when they could make it, rosary in the van on the way to practice. Tom taught catechism to the confirmation kids. Amy led the prayer group for parents whose children were being crushed by social media. They were, in every visible way, a model Catholic family. Then came the night everything cracked open. Olivia had come home from high school that April with fresh cuts on her thighs. She had locked herself in the bathroom and refused to come out. Amy, desperate, sat on the floor outside the door for 3 hours begging through the wood. When Olivia finally opened the door, her eyes were hollow. She whispered, "Mom, I just want the noise to stop." That night, Amy did what thousands of mothers do when they run out of answers. She went online. In a private Facebook group for Catholic mothers of depressed teens, someone posted a method she had never seen before. It was presented innocently, almost sweetly. The instructions were simple. Every night, hold your child close, place your lips near their ear, and repeat a short phrase over and over until they fall asleep. The phrase given was this: "You are light, darkness cannot touch you. You are light, darkness cannot touch you." The woman who posted it claimed her own daughter had been suicidal for 2 years, and after 3 weeks of this nightly ritual, the girl was sleeping through the night, smiling again, even making friends. Dozens of mothers chimed in underneath. "It worked for us. My son stopped cutting. It's like a miracle." Amy read the thread until 3 in the morning. She printed the instructions, highlighted the phrase, and that very night, when Olivia finally collapsed into bed, Amy crawled in beside her, wrapped her arms around her daughter, and began to whisper, "You are light, darkness cannot touch you," over and over and over for almost 40 minutes, until Olivia's breathing slowed and she slipped into sleep. The next morning, Olivia ate breakfast without being forced. She even laughed at something her little sister said. 3 nights later, she asked if they could pray a decade of the rosary together before the whispering started. Amy was ecstatic. She posted her own testimony in the group. Within days, the thread exploded. Mothers were messaging her privately, begging for details, asking if they could share it with their own circles. Amy, overjoyed that something was finally working, began recording gentle audio versions of the phrase and emailing them to other moms. By the end of May, more than 70 women in 3 states were using the exact same words, the exact same nightly embrace. And that, brothers and sisters, is precisely how the demon gained permission. You see, fallen spirits are bound by rigid laws. They cannot cross the threshold of a soul without consent, and consent is often given in the smallest, most innocent-sounding ways. In this instance, the entity later identified itself to me as Asmodeus, the same spirit named in the book of Tobit, the one who murders husbands on their wedding night out of envy for sacramental love. and who hates nothing more than the ordered harmony of a Catholic family. Asmodeus is not a spirit of blatant violence at first. He is a spirit of counterfeit intimacy. He loves to hide inside tenderness, inside concern, inside the very embrace of a mother for her child. The phrase itself, "You are light, darkness cannot touch you," sounds biblical, almost Johannine, but it is not. It is a subtle inversion. Scripture never tells us that we, by our own nature, are impervious to darkness. Scripture tells us that Christ is the light, and only in him do we become children of light. The phrase the mothers were repeating was a declaration of human self-sufficiency, a quiet proclamation that the child no longer needed the protection of Christ, the church, or the sacraments, only the repeating voice of the parent. It was, in effect, a tiny act of magical thinking dressed up as maternal love, and magical thinking always opens a door. Amy noticed the first physical sign about 10 days in. She woke up exhausted, as if she had not slept at all, even though she had been in bed for 9 hours. Her arms ached where she had held Olivia. She began to hear, just on the edge of sleep, a faint whispering back, not Olivia's voice, but something childlike, sing-song, repeating the phrase to her. She thought it was imagination. She doubled down. She started using the ritual on Liam when he had nightmares after losing a soccer game, and on little Grace when she was afraid of storms. Within a month, the entire household was sleeping better than they ever had. Tom, exhausted from work, even joked that whatever his wife was doing, he wanted in on it. By midsummer, Amy had been invited to speak at 3 different moms' conferences in the Denver area. Her blog traffic tripled. A small Catholic publishing house reached out about turning her method into a book. She titled the manuscript "Whispered Light: A Mother's Way to Heal the Hidden Hurts of Her Child." Pre-orders were strong before a single copy had been printed, and still no priest had been consulted. No discernment had been sought. 70 families, perhaps more, were now performing this nightly ritual, and the demon was moving freely from home to home through the very channel of maternal affection. I want you to picture it. Dozens of Catholic bedrooms across that suburb, lights low, mothers climbing into bed with their teenagers, their preteens, even their little ones, wrapping them tightly, and breathing the same words into their ears night after night after night. 70 doors cracked open at the exact same moment. 70 permissions granted without a single person realizing what they had done. That was only the beginning. In part 2, I will describe the first unmistakable manifestations inside the Harper home, how Asmodeus began to speak with Amy's own voice, and how the Spirit started to spread envy and division faster than any virus could ever travel. But for now, remember this: the devil does not always come with horns and sulfur. Sometimes he comes as the answer to a mother's most desperate prayer, wearing the mask of consolation, whispering exactly what she most wants to hear. And that, my friends, is when he is most dangerous of all. By the end of July of that same year, 2015, the first unmistakable signs appeared inside the Harper house, and they did not come with thunder or levitating furniture. They came with a whisper that had a personality. Amy had put the younger children to bed early. Tom was still at the office finishing a proposal that was due the next morning. Olivia, now 17 that summer, asked her mother if they could do the words one more time before she went to sleep. Amy, of course, agreed. They lay on Olivia's bed in the dark, the only light coming from the street lamp through the blinds. Amy wrapped her arms around her daughter from behind, pressed her lips almost against Olivia's ear, and began the familiar rhythm. "You are light, darkness cannot touch you. You are light, darkness cannot touch you." And free. She had repeated it perhaps 30 times when something changed. The temperature in the room dropped so suddenly that both of them shivered at the same moment. Olivia's body went rigid. Then, from Olivia's own mouth, but in a voice that was not Olivia's, higher, childish, almost sing-song yet ancient at the same time, came an answer. "And you are mine, Mother. You gave me the door when you decided your words were stronger than his." Amy jerked back as if she had been slapped. Olivia rolled over, eyes wide open, pupils dilated to the point that almost no brown showed, and said in her normal voice, "Mom, Why did you stop? It was just starting to feel warm. She had no memory of speaking the other sentence. Amy told herself it was a trick of exhaustion. She finished the ritual quickly, kissed her daughter goodnight, and went downstairs shaking. She poured herself a glass of wine, something she almost never did alone, and sat at the kitchen island staring at the printed sheet with the phrase on it. That night she dreamed of a tall figure standing at the foot of her bed, faceless, arms too long, whispering the same words back to her in a voice that sounded exactly like Grace, her 8-year-old. 3 nights later it happened again, only this time the voice came through Amy herself. She was holding Liam after a bad soccer practice. He had been benched for arguing with a teammate, and he was crying into her shoulder. She started the ritual automatically. You are light. Darkness cannot touch you. On the 7th repetition, her own voice cracked, dropped half an octave, and continued without pause, but the words were different. No, little king, you are not light. Your sister is the light. She gets the words every night. You get scraps. Hate her, and take what is yours. Liam pulled away, terrified. Amy's eyes had rolled back slightly. A thin string of saliva ran from the corner of her mouth. 30 seconds later, she blinked, looked at her son, and asked why he was staring at her like that. Liam ran to his room and locked the door. For the first time in weeks, he wet the bed that night, something he had not done since he was 5. Within 10 days, the spirit had a name. It was a Tuesday evening. Tom had come home early for once. The whole family was in the living room praying the rosary together, something they had restarted because Amy said it helped the words work better. They were on the 3rd glorious mystery when Amy suddenly doubled over, gripping the couch cushions so hard her knuckles went white. Her mouth opened and a voice came out that sounded like a child speaking through a broken music box. High, metallic, layered, as if several children were speaking at once. I am Asmodeus. I killed 7 husbands before breakfast in the old days. Now I kill families slowly, with kisses. You invited me, Amy Harper. You invited me when you thought a mother's love could replace the blood of the Lamb. Tom lunged for the holy water font by the door and began splashing it while shouting the St. Michael prayer. The reaction was immediate and violent. Amy was thrown backward over the couch, landing on her back with such force that the wind was knocked out of her. A burn mark in the perfect shape of a cross appeared on her forehead where a single drop had landed. The children screamed. Grace began vomiting a thick black substance that smelled of spoiled milk and sulfur. Olivia started laughing uncontrollably, then cutting her arms with her fingernails right there on the carpet. Tom dragged all 3 children out of the house and into the minivan. He drove straight to the rectory. The pastor, a gentle older priest who had never seen anything like this in 40 years of ministry, called the chancery that night. The auxiliary bishop asked for a full report. By the time the file reached my desk in early August, 23 families in the parish had reported identical incidents. Mothers speaking in unnatural voices, children suddenly consumed with violent envy toward siblings, marital arguments that ended with one spouse attempting strangulation for no reason, and in 4 cases, teenagers who had never shown violence before attempting to hang themselves with rosary beads. Asmodeus does not work alone for long. Where there is envy and destruction of the family, Lilith is never far behind. She is the one who hates the fruit of the womb, who teaches mothers to devour their own children under the guise of protection. By September, Amy had begun hearing a second voice, female, seductive, maternal, but icy. It told her that Tom did not understand her mission, that the children were holding her back from the greater work, that real mothers sacrifice everything, even their families, for the healing of the world. Amy stopped going to Mass. She told the other mothers in the group that the Eucharist was too harsh for the gentle energy they were channeling. She replaced the crucifix in the master bedroom with a dream catcher a woman from Boulder had sent her. She started signing her emails in the light instead of in Christ. The blog post became longer, stranger, filled with phrases like, the divine feminine speaks through the whisper of the mother, and the old patriarchal church fears the power we have unlocked. Tom tried everything. He brought in the parish priest for a blessing of the house. Amy laughed in the priest's face and told him his stole was blocking the flow of energy. He scheduled an appointment with a Catholic therapist. Amy went once, then accused the doctor of being in league with dark forces that want to silence women. He begged her to stop the ritual. She refused, saying the children needed it now more than ever. By Thanksgiving, the first suicide occurred. A 14-year-old boy from the parish youth group, the oldest of 3, hanged himself in his garage the night after his mother had done the whispering ritual with him for the 42nd consecutive night. His note was only 7 words. She gets the light, I get nothing. 2 weeks later, a 15-year-old girl walked into traffic on Santa Fe Drive holding her mother's hand. She had been whispering the phrase to herself all day. The diocese finally acted. They forbade the practice publicly from the pulpit and sent letters to every Catholic school in the area. Amy went on the offensive. She posted a 20-minute video titled, "Why the Church Wants Your Child to Stay Broken." Within 48 hours, it had 200,000 views. Comments poured in from mothers all over the country thanking her for standing up to the patriarchy. That was when the ordinary demonic infestation became an extraordinary epidemic. Asmodeus and Lilith had achieved what few demons ever manage. They had weaponized the sacramentality of motherhood itself. Every embrace, every whispered phrase, every goodnight kiss performed with those words became a conduit. The spirits moved from house to house the way flu moves through a school, only faster because permission had already been given by the parents themselves. I received the formal request for assistance in December of 2016. The letter from the bishop was short. We have a spirit that is spreading through maternal affection. Standard minor exorcisms are ineffective. The families are fracturing faster than we can respond. Please come. I flew out the day after Christmas. When I walked into the Harper home for the first time, the oppression hit me like walking into a meat locker. The temperature was 29 degrees inside the house, though the thermostat read 71. Every crucifix had been turned upside down. The children were not present. Tom had moved them to his parents' house in Fort Collins 2 weeks earlier. Amy sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by printed emails from grateful mothers. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hair unwashed, and she weighed perhaps 95 pounds. When she looked up at me and smiled, I saw that her teeth had begun to blacken at the gums, a classic sign of prolonged diabolic attachment. She greeted me with the words, "Father, you're just in time. The light wants to meet you." That first session lasted 4 hours. Asmodeus spoke fluent Latin, quoted St. John of the Cross to mock me, and bragged that he had already destroyed 37 marriages in that parish alone. Lilith manifested separately, screaming in a voice that sounded like 1,000 grieving mothers, accusing me of hating women because I wore the Roman collar. Before I left that night, I commanded the spirits, in the name of Jesus Christ and by the authority of his church, to cease the whispering ritual entirely. The reaction was immediate. Amy levitated 6 inches off the chair. Her head struck the ceiling with a sound like a melon hitting concrete, and every window in the house shattered outward at the same moment. I knew then that we were dealing with something that had embedded itself deeply into the generational lines of dozens of families. This was no longer a single possession. It was a territorial infestation with Amy Harper as the primary vector. In part 3, I will take you through the first major exorcism attempted by the local priest, how it failed spectacularly. The moment the demons began demanding child sacrifice as payment, and the night Amy Harper tried to baptize her children in the blood of a family pet while reciting the inverted whisper. Stay with me, the worst was still to come. When I returned to the Harper residence on the morning of December 27th, 2016, the house had already begun to change physically in ways that the natural order simply does not permit. The front door opened by itself before I could ring the bell. The temperature inside had fallen another 12 degrees overnight. My breath hung in the air like incense. Every analog clock in the house was running backward at different speeds. The large family Bible on the coffee table was open to the book of Tobit, but the pages from chapter 6 through 8, the exact chapters that describe the binding of Asmodeus by the angel Raphael, had been ripped out and burned in the kitchen sink. The ashes were still smoldering. Amy was waiting for me in the living room, seated perfectly straight on the couch, hands folded in her lap like a child at First Communion. Her eyes were open but completely black, sclera included. When she spoke, 3 distinct voices came out in perfect unison: the childish sing-song of Asmodeus, the icy maternal tone of Lilith, and somewhere underneath, very faint, Amy's own voice pleading for help. She, or rather they, greeted me with this sentence, delivered without blinking: "Welcome, priest of the jealous God. 37 marriages are dead. 42 children now belong to us by maternal consent. You are late." Of C. I set up immediately in the living room: purple, stole, ritual, holy water from the Jordan, first-class relics of St. Gemma Galgani and Blessed Bartolo Longo, and a crucifix that had been used in the exorcism of Annalise Michel. The local ordinary had already granted the facultas years earlier, so no time was wasted on permissions. The first major exorcism began at 9:04 in the morning and did not conclude until after midnight. From the moment I began the Litany of the Saints, the manifestations escalated with a precision and intelligence that I have rarely encountered. Asmodeus refused to speak English for the first 2 hours. He answered every question in archaic Persian, the language of the court of Susa, where the Book of Tobit places his original defeat. When I switched to Latin, he mocked the post-Vatican pronunciations and insisted on the old ecclesiastical. When I commanded him in Greek, he laughed and said, "The Greek was better when we walked in Alexandria, priest." At 11:30, the demon shifted tactics. Amy's body levitated horizontally until she was parallel to the floor, 4.5 feet in the air. Her head turned 180 degrees with a wet cracking sound. Then Lilith took primary control. The voice that came out was soft, almost tender, the way a mother speaks to a newborn. "Look at her, Father. Look how thin she has become feeding us. She sacrificed her beauty for the children. And you want to take that sacrifice away? You men always do." At that exact moment, every wedding photograph in the house crashed off the walls simultaneously. The glass did not merely break, it powdered as though it had been ground in a mortar. Tom, who was present in the room as the husband, and therefore the proper authority under canon law, began to weep uncontrollably. Lilith turned Amy's head toward him and said, still in that gentle lullaby tone, "See, Thomas? Even now he cries because he never deserved you. Leave him and come fully to us. We will make you a mother to nations." Tom lunged forward to touch his wife. The moment his hand made contact with her ankle, he was hurled backward into the stone fireplace with enough force to crack 2 ribs. He lay there gasping while the demon laughed through Amy's mouth, a sound like a nursery rhyme played on rusted bells. Around 2 in the afternoon, the demons began the torment of truth. They listed, in order, every secret mortal sin Tom had ever committed since the age of reason, every hidden lust, every lie on his taxes, every time he had coveted a coworker. Then they turned to me and did the same, naming sins I had confessed and been absolved of decades earlier. The point, of course, was to produce despair. I reminded them that the blood of Christ had already washed those sins away. Asmodeus replied, "We know. We just enjoy watching you squirm while you remember." At 4:30, the first demand for child sacrifice was made explicitly. Amy's body dropped suddenly to the carpet. She crawled on all 4s toward the crucifix I had placed on the coffee table, but could not cross an invisible line about 18 inches from it. Lilith spoke. "Give us the fruit of her womb willingly, priest. 1 child. The youngest is still pure. We will stop the spreading for 1 single child. Grace is 8. She will not suffer long." Amy already knows how to hold her under the bathwater while whispering the words. 1 life for hundreds. Even your God thought that was a fair trade once. I responded with the Praecipio Tibi for the 3rd time that day. The reaction was volcanic. Amy's abdomen distended as though she were 9 months pregnant. She vomited a quantity of human blood that could not possibly have fit inside her body, later measured at just under 3 gallons. The blood was still warm and contained fragments of what appeared to be placental tissue. Laboratory analysis later showed it belonged to multiple fetal types, none of them Amy's. By 7 in the evening, the local priest who had been assisting me collapsed from exhaustion and had to be carried out. I continued alone with Tom and 1 laywoman who had experience in deliverance ministry. That was when the inversion of the ritual began. Amy stood up, perfectly calm, walked to the hallway closet, and retrieved the family's old baptismal gown that Grace had worn 8 years earlier. She laid it on the floor, knelt, and began reciting the whispering phrase backward, syllable by syllable, while rocking the empty gown as if it held a child. With each repetition, a new bruise appeared on her body in the exact places infants are held, in her forearms, across the chest, under the chin. The bruises formed perfect infantile handprints. At 10:30 that night, the demons attempted a direct assault on the Blessed Sacrament. I had placed a consecrated host inside a pyx on the makeshift altar. Asmodeus screamed in genuine pain, not the theatrical howling from earlier, but real agony, and demanded I remove it. When I refused, Amy's body was contorted into the shape of a cross, arms outstretched, feet together, head hanging forward, her shoulders dislocated with audible pops. Blood began to drip from her palms and feet in straight lines, as though nails had been driven through. The stigmata-like wounds were superficial but perfectly formed. At 11:58, just before midnight, Asmodeus made his final offer of the session. "Leave now, priest. Take your toys and go. We will give Amy perfect health, restore her family, make her richer than she ever dreamed. All she has to do is finish the book. 100,000 mothers will whisper our words by next Easter. Think of the harvest." I answered with the final conjuration of the old ritual. The response was immediate and terrifying. Every light bulb in the house exploded at once. The temperature plunged to 15 degrees. Amy's body rose again, this time upside down, limbs spread in mockery of the cross. A voice that was neither male nor female boomed from the ceiling. "This one is ours by right of invitation. You have no authority here." I held up the relic of the true cross and pronounced the words of binding. For one terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then Amy's body slammed to the floor so hard that her spine fractured in 2 places. She lay there motionless, breathing shallow, eyes normal for the first time all day. I thought, for about 30 seconds, that we had achieved a breakthrough. We had not. She was simply resting. The demons had decided the house was no longer advantageous. They wanted a larger stage. 3 days later, on New Year's Eve, Amy Harper checked herself out of the hospital against medical advice, drove to the parish church during the midnight mass, walked straight to the ambo while the priest was distributing communion, and began screaming the inverted whisper at the top of her lungs. Over 400 people heard it. 42 mothers in the congregation knew the phrase instantly and, without understanding why, began repeating it under their breath. That night, the infestation jumped from dozens of families to hundreds. By January 15th, 2017, the diocese had recorded 11 completed suicides of minors, 23 attempts, and 89 marital separations directly linked to the whispering ritual. The local news still called it a tragic cluster of teen depression. The chancery knew better. Amy disappeared for 6 weeks. We later discovered she had been living in a rented cabin outside Estes Park with 7 other possessed mothers, conducting what they called whisper retreats. Photographs from those weeks show them sitting in a circle at night, each holding a doll made from their children's clothing, rocking and whispering in perfect unison. When she returned in late February, she was no longer walking on her own. Her legs had atrophied completely from the spinal injury. She moved by crawling, rapidly, like something insectile. The book had been self-published during her absence. Title, Mother's Eternal Light. It sold 38,000 copies in the first week through online Catholic bookstores before the imprimatur office caught wind and forced a recall. That was when the bishop called me again and said, "Father, we are out of options. She is coming for the children at the school next." Avendry 4. In part 4, I will take you into the sealed church for the major exorcism that lasted 9 consecutive days, the night the demons attempted to consecrate a child as a living host, and the precise moment Asmodeus and Lilith realized they had finally met a will stronger than their permission. What happened next almost broke every exorcist present, including me. The final battle began on Tuesday of Holy Week, 2017, inside the locked church of St. Francis Cabrini in Littleton, Colorado. The bishop had closed the parish to the public for 9 straight days. Black plastic covered every window from the inside. The tabernacle was emptied and the Blessed Sacrament reserved in the rectory safe. 24-hour armed security, off-duty Catholic police officers who had volunteered stood at every door because the demons had already threatened to burn the building down with the children inside. 7 exorcists were present. Myself as the principal exorcist, the local diocesan exorcist who had been working the case for months, 2 priests from the Society of St. Pius X who specialized in the old ritual, 1 Franciscan who had served in Liberia and seen territorial spirits before, 1 retired Marine chaplain who functions as my primary restraint, and most importantly, Father Grace Thompson, a 72-year-old nun exorcist from the Archdiocese of Denver who had been trained personally by Father Carlos Vaca in the 1970s. She was the only one among us whom Lilith feared on sight. Amy Harper arrived in a wheelchair pushed by 2 orderlies from the psychiatric ward where she had been held under 72-hour suicide watch. Her legs were completely paralyzed below the L3 vertebra from the spinal fracture in December. She weighed 87 pounds. Her hair had fallen out in clumps, leaving large bald patches. Her teeth were now loose and black at the roots. When the doors of the church closed behind her, she smiled with a mouth that looked more animal than human and said in perfect unison, male and female voices together, "At last, the bridal chamber." We had prepared the entire nave as the arena. Pews removed, floor covered in heavy canvas, industrial buckets every 10 feet, multiple IV poles with saline because prolonged possession causes extreme dehydration, and a reinforced steel restraint chair bolted to the concrete slab where the altar rail used to be. Around the chair, we had drawn a 9-foot circle in blessed salt mixed with the ashes of burnt palm from the previous Palm Sunday and the Epiphany chalk. A second circle, 3 feet inside the first, contained fragments of the true cross, soil from the tomb of St. Peter, and water from the Jordan River, frozen into a solid ring. The chair sat at the exact center. Amy was transferred from the wheelchair to the restraint chair at 8:07 in the morning. The moment the leather cuffs touched her wrists, the temperature in the church dropped 39 degrees in under 4 seconds. Frost formed on the inside of the stained glass windows even though it was 68 degrees outside. Every candle on the temporary altar went out simultaneously. Day 1 was reconnaissance. The demons refused to manifest fully, speaking only in whispers that came from different parts of the building, never from Amy's mouth. They recited the names of every aborted child from every mother who had ever used the whispering ritual, hundreds of names in alphabetical order, with exact dates of conception and death. They knew things no human being could know. At 3 in the afternoon, they began singing a lullaby in what sounded like Middle English, the same melody but with inverted Latin lyrics praising the mother of the unmade. On day 2, they tried to bargain again. Asmodeus offered to leave every family untouched if we would simply allow the book to remain in print. He projected sales figures onto the wall in letters of fire, 2 million copies by 2020, 20,000 children whispering every night by 2025. He promised Amy perfect health, reunion with her husband, and a private audience with the Holy Father if we walked away. When we refused, Lilith took over and began weeping blood, real human blood that ran backward up her cheeks and into her hairline. Day 3 brought the first attempt at direct murder. At 2:33 in the morning, while Father Thompson and I were praying the Office of Readings, Amy's body snapped every restraint strap simultaneously. The leather was not cut, it simply unbuckled itself. She rose straight up out of the chair, limbs hanging limp, until she was suspended 15 feet above the floor, directly over the altar. Then she dropped. We had padded the area with wrestling mats 4 inches thick, but the impact still shattered both femurs. The screams that came out of her were not human. They were the combined voices of every child who had died by suicide in that parish since 2015, screaming in unison through her mouth. We reset the bones as best we could, splinted them, and continued. She healed unnaturally fast. By morning, the fractures were already knitting. Day 4 was the night of the false consecration. The demons had managed to smuggle something into the church. We discovered later that one of the volunteers guarding the door had been a mother who once used the ritual and still carried latent attachment. Through her, they introduced a child's umbilical cord, still bloody, still warm, wrapped around a lock of hair from little Grace Harper. At 11:11 at night, Amy began the words of consecration from the Mass, but inverted. "Take this, all of you, and bind it." This is my body, which will be broken for you. She was attempting to consecrate the umbilical cord as a counterhost, to create a living anti-sacrament that would bind every child who had ever heard the whisper. Father Thompson moved faster than any 72-year-old woman should be able to. She seized the relic of St. Maria Goretti, pressed it against Amy's lips, and commanded in the name of the Immaculate Conception. The cord burst into blue flame that did not burn the canvas. The smell of lilies filled the entire church for exactly 7 seconds. Day 5 through 7 blurred together in a haze of violence, blasphemy, and exhaustion. Amy spoke in tongues none of us recognized, later identified by a linguist at Catholic University as a dialect of ancient Akkadian used only in fertility cults. She vomited nails, teeth, and what appeared to be fetal bones. On day 6, the demons forced her to relive every abortion any mother in the whispering group had ever undergone, screaming the sensations aloud while clawing at her own abdomen until her fingernails split. By the dawn of Holy Saturday, we were all running on coffee and grace alone. 3 priests had to be relieved because of chest pain. One of the younger ones began hearing the whisper in his own mother's voice and had to be removed from the building entirely. At 3 o'clock on Holy Saturday afternoon, the traditional hour of our Lord's death, the true crisis arrived. Asmodeus and Lilith manifested simultaneously in their full malice. Amy's body contorted into an impossible position, spine arched backward until her head touched her heels, arms twisted behind her like wings. 2 sets of eyes opened in her face, 1 pair normal, 1 pair completely white. The voices that came out shook the foundations of the church. We are legion now. Every whisper was a vote. Every mother who chose her words over his became our Senate. You have no authority because they gave us theirs freely. Watch. M. At that moment, every mobile phone in the rectory, in the security vehicles, even in the houses 2 blocks away, began receiving the same push notification from an unknown source. The message was a 30-second audio file. When played, it was the whispering phrase recorded in the voices of the listener's own children saying their own names. Mommy, you are light. Darkness cannot touch you. Come back to bed. Within 20 minutes, we had reports of 6 mothers attempting to hang themselves in their garages while the recording played on loop. We countered with the most powerful weapon the church possesses, the Paschal fire. Father Thompson had kept the new Easter fire burning in a bronze bowl since the vigil preparation. At the exact moment the demons claimed victory, she lifted the bowl and hurled the burning coals into the salt circle. The fire did not spread naturally. Instead, it formed a perfect ring of blue flame that rose 6 feet high, encircling the restraint chair completely. The demons howled as though burned by acid. That was the turning point. For the first time in 9 days, Amy's own voice, weak, hoarse, but unmistakably hers, broke through. Father, please, I can see them. They're in my arms. Get them off my children. Oh. I stepped inside the ring of fire. It was cool to the touch, and began the final series of commands from the 1,962 ritual, the ones reserved for princes of hell. I invoked the binding of Raphael from the book of Tobit by name. I invoked the triumph of the cross. I invoked the Immaculate Conception as the one creature who crushed the serpent without ever giving permission. At 5:47 p.m. on Holy Saturday, Asmodeus roared a sound that shattered every remaining light bulb in the church and caused the crucifix above the old high altar to crack down the middle. A visible shadow, blacker than any absence of light, tore out of Amy's mouth, circled the nave 3 times, screaming in a language that made the Marines present weep like children, then shot downward through the floor as though pulled by an invisible chain. Lilith lasted another 11 minutes. She tried one last seduction, offering Amy a vision of her children running to her healthy and whole if she would only say the whisper one more time. Amy, covered in blood and bruises, looked straight at me with tears running clear paths through the filth on her face and said, "No, only Jesus, only his words." At that moment, Father Thompson placed the relic of the true cross directly on Amy's tongue. Lilith let out a shriek like 1,000 widows discovering their children dead, and a second shadow, this one feminine in shape, with long hair that moved like serpents, was ripped out through Amy's chest. It hovered for a moment, raging, then dissolved into nothing with a sound like a mother's sob cut short. Amy collapsed forward. The restraints held her upright. She was unconscious for 18 minutes. When she opened her eyes at 6:05 p.m., the paralysis was gone. She stood up on legs that had not supported her weight in months, walked to the temporary altar, and fell on her knees before the crucifix, weeping in a way I have rarely heard from an adult. The church smelled of ozone, lilies, and burnt palm. The 9-day exorcism was over, but the war was not. In the final part, I will tell you what happened in the 10 years that followed. The slow, painful road of restitution, the letters Amy still receives from mothers who used the ritual and lost children, the night in 2023 when a new copy of the book surfaced online and we had to do it all again with a 16-year-old girl in Oregon, and the reason I now require every single mother who comes to me for help with a depressed child to renounce that specific phrase by name before I will even bless the house. Because some doors, once opened, never fully close unless every key is accounted for. When the church doors were finally unlocked at dawn on Easter Sunday 2017, the first thing the security officers noticed was the smell. Thick, sweet, almost cloying, like 1,000 Easter lilies left to rot in holy water fonts. The second thing they noticed was Amy Harper kneeling alone in front of the cracked crucifix, fully dressed in the white baptismal gown we had burned on day 4. No one had brought it into the building. It was simply there, spotless, fitting her perfectly, as though it had waited 10 years for this moment. She turned when the doors opened, and for the first time in 2 years, every person present saw the real Amy. Eyes clear, face flushed with genuine color, tears cutting channels through 9 days of filth and blood. She spoke only 7 words, but I still hear them when I am tempted to despair about any case. I remember who I am now. The demons were gone, truly gone, not suppressed, not dormant, not waiting for the next lunar cycle. Gone in the way that only the cross and the willing fiat of a soul repeated in the midst of unimaginable torment can accomplish. The medical team that examined her 3 hours later found no trace of the spinal fracture, no paralysis, no internal injuries, not even scar tissue on her palms and feet. The doctors used phrases like spontaneous remission and medically inexplicable. We used a different phrase, resurrection. But resurrection is never the end of the story in these matters. It is only the beginning of the accounting. Tom arrived with the children that same afternoon. They had been staying 2 hours north in Fort Collins under the protection of a cloistered Carmelite community the entire 9 days. Olivia, now almost 18, walked in first. She took one look at her mother kneeling in that baptismal gown and collapsed, sobbing in a way that only a child who has watched her mother become a stranger can sob. Liam, 14 going on 40, stood frozen in the narthex, clutching a rosary so tightly his knuckles were white. Little Grace, 8 years old, and carrying the weight of memories no 8-year-old should ever have, simply walked forward, climbed into her mother's lap as though no time had passed, buried her face in Amy's neck, and whispered the only phrase she had refused to say for 2 years. "Mommy, I love you. Please don't whisper anymore." Amy held her so tightly I thought bones would break, but none did. They did not go home that night. They went to a retreat house run by the Sisters of Life in Denver and stayed there for 6 straight months. Every day began with Mass, every night ended with the family rosary, and every Wednesday, Amy met with me or Father Thompson for what we call integration work, the long, slow process of closing every door, revoking every permission, renouncing every word that had ever been spoken in that ritual. She wrote in her own hand a 47-page formal renunciation that was later witnessed by the bishop and sealed in the diocesan archives. To this day, it is the longest single renunciation I have ever seen. The restitution phase was brutal in its own quiet way. Amy personally contacted every mother she could find who had ever used the whisper, 319 women. She called them, wrote them, showed up on doorsteps when necessary. She told them the full truth, no softening, no excuses. 112 of them slammed the door in her face. 43 threatened lawsuits. 11 had already lost children to suicide and screamed at her until their voices gave out. But 94 sat down and listened, wept with her, and agreed to formal renunciation prayers. 78 of those 94 families are intact today and back at Sunday Mass. The others while some wounds only purgatory will heal. The book was pulped. Every copy the diocese could locate, 38,000 in warehouses alone, was collected and burned in an industrial incinerator on the feast of St. Michael. Amy paid for it out of her own savings, which meant she and Tom lost the house on Mineral Avenue. They moved into a small 3-bedroom rental 6 blocks from the parish and started over at 41 and 43 years old with nothing but debt and 3 traumatized children. Olivia entered religious life in 2020 with the Sisters of Life, the same community that had sheltered them. She took the name Sister Raphael of the Binding. Her final vows were last year. Liam joined the Marines at 18, did 2 tours in the Middle East, came home with a Bronze Star and a daily rosary habit he will not explain to anyone. Grace is now 16, plays varsity soccer, and wants to study child psychology. The scars on her arms from when she was 8, trying to make mommy happy again, are faint white lines now, but she wears them without shame. She calls them my reminder that love sometimes has to hurt before it heals. Amy herself never wrote another blog post, never accepted another speaking engagement. She works part-time as a night janitor at the very Catholic school her children once attended, the one where she once tried to start a second wave. Every evening at 10 o'clock, she can be found on her hands and knees scrubbing the cafeteria floor, offering each stroke for the souls of the children who were lost. On her days off, she drives an hour and a half to the state women's prison and leads a rosary group for mothers incarcerated for crimes against their own children. She tells them, without drama, I was on my way there too. Only grace stopped me. There have been 4 attempts to resurrect the ritual since 2017. The first was in 2019 when a New Age influencer in California repackaged the exact phrase as quantum light lullaby. We caught it early. The woman had no idea of the origin. She claimed it came to her in a dream, 3 Zoom deliverance sessions, and 1 very firm letter from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles shut it down. The second was in 2021 in France, translated into French as Lumière Maternelle. That one reached 14,000 mothers before the French Bishops' Conference asked for help. I flew over with Father Thompson. We spent 2 weeks in Lyon doing mass renunciations in parish halls. The French mothers cried harder than any group I have ever seen. The third was the worst. In 2023, a 16-year-old girl in Portland, Oregon, whose mother had used the ritual when she was an infant, began hearing the whisper internally at night. She had no conscious memory of it, but the attachment had lain dormant for 15 years. She started a private Discord server where 280 depressed Catholic teens were teaching each other the phrase as a coping mechanism. By the time the Archdiocese discovered it, 9 kids had been hospitalized for self-harm. We did a citywide day of repentance on the feast of Our Lady of Sorrows. The girl is now in college studying theology and helps me screen cases. The 4th attempt is happening right now as I speak to you in November of 2025. Someone has uploaded a clean PDF of Mother's Eternal Light to 3 different forbidden Catholic book sites, complete with a new foreword claiming it was suppressed by the patriarchy. Downloads are already in the tens of thousands. We are tracking it, but the internet is a hydra. Cut off 1 head and 2 more appear. That is why I tell this story, because the permission given in that suburb 10 years ago was never fully revoked in every heart. There are still mothers, good mothers, desperate mothers, who will read those words tonight and think, it's just a lullaby. What harm could it do? I want them to know what harm it did. I want them to know that Asmodeus and Lilith are not fairy tales. They are princes of the fallen choirs who have had 6,000 years to study the precise fracture points of a mother's heart. They know exactly where exhaustion meets love and turns it into pride. They know that a tired woman at 3 in the morning will trade anything, even her own soul, for 5 hours of sleep and a child who does not hate herself. They offered Amy Harper a miracle, and she took it because it looked like mercy. Do not make the same mistake. If you have ever used those words, if you have ever whispered anything to your child that placed your voice in the place of Christ's voice, stop tonight. Go to confession tomorrow. Have your house blessed. Burn whatever you wrote it on. And then hold your child. Yes, hold them close, but speak only the words the Church has given us, the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be. Speak the name of Jesus until your throat is raw if you have to. but never ever again let your love become the doorway. Amy Harper is 60 years old now. She has 4 grandchildren she is allowed to see twice a year under strict supervision. Some wounds in the family are still healing. Every Easter Sunday she returns to St. Francis Cabrini, kneels in the exact spot where the restraint chair was bolted to the floor, and prays a rosary of thanksgiving that lasts from dawn until the evening Mass. The crack in the crucifix has never been repaired. The parish left it that way on purpose. It is a reminder. Last year, on the 10th anniversary, I celebrated the Easter Vigil with the pastor. When we reached the renewal of baptismal promises, Amy stood up in her pew, white hair now, thin as paper, eyes bright as a girl's, and renewed her vows louder than anyone in the building. When the priest asked, "Do you reject Satan and all his empty promises?" she answered with a voice that carried to the last row, "I rejected him 10 years ago with every drop of blood in my body, and I reject him again tonight with every breath I have left." That, brothers and sisters, is what victory looks like on the other side of hell. It is not pretty. It is not painless. It is not the stuff of movies. It is a woman on her knees in a rented house at 3 a.m. praying for mothers she has never met, begging God that no one ever again mistakes a demon's lullaby for the voice of mercy. Remember Amy Harper the next time your child wakes up screaming. Remember her when social media offers you the perfect solution in a pretty font. Remember her when you are so tired you cannot think straight and someone whispers, "It's just words. What could it hurt?" Because some words open doors that only the blood of the real Lamb can close. And once a door like that has been opened in a mother's arms, it takes nothing less than Calvary to shut it again. Thank you for listening. I will take questions now, but first, let us stand and pray the St. Michael prayer together, slowly, out loud, and mean every single word.